I wanted to talk briefly about something that I read on a blog, and I got some feelings on the subject, but it really got me pondering first about leveling up one's understanding of the mechanics of the game, and the roles of a class that's presented. Because if you misunderstand the role of a class, like really fundamentally misunderstand it, or believe that all classes fall into one category or one use, one role, I think that can also color the perception of a class. So I was reading some blog posts specifically on Astral Self, and their analysis of Astral Self I need to think more on, but the initial analysis of the monk kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And it's because they presented the idea that the monk is a terrible class. Monks are really bad in 5e. In fact, they're not quite as bad as Beastmaster Ranger, but they're really close. And their justification for that was, in their experience, that they get hit all the time, they get hit more often, they have low hit points, and their damage output is terrible. However, in my experience of playing monks, yes, my hit points are lower, but especially at higher levels, by the time I get Diamond Soul, I'm proficient in all of my saving throws, and I have evasion. I'm a lot harder to hit. If I've been, now, this is where also I think a stat array, like a standard array, will be different. Your defenses will be a little bit different. But if you're rolling for stats, the monk does benefit pretty well from that, because if you can max out your dex and your wisdom, then you'll get like an automatic plus 10 to your AC, and then it becomes 20. If you have bracers of defense, cloak of protection, and a ring of protection, your AC is now 24. And you have evasion, and your proficiency bonuses are pretty good. Now, all of that being said, the monk was supposed to be self-sufficient, and I think about them in the sense that you can punch ghosts. You're not dependent like the fighter is on the gear that you have so that you can be effective in combat. The idea is it's all about you as a singular entity. You can move really well, especially coupled with the mobile feat, and even Drunken Master, you can hit somebody and then get away without causing an attack of opportunity. The idea is to move around the battlefield, and I wonder if the defining feature of the monk is actually the Stunning Strike, which means their purpose isn't damage output. I've never been a monk that can really deal a lot of damage, but my most effective thing is Stunning Strike. All the time. That is the thing that burns legendary resistances. It's the thing that, at least in my experience so far. I'm watching John, and he's got thoughts. I know you were going to get there, but it brought up some things. I still want to think more about it. It started enough of a blog post that I'm like, there's things I want to say about this. And yet, as we've been able to discuss well enough on this show, I'll present an idea that is my perspective. And I do so here because I know you two will come at it from another angle that I don't have because I'm not you. So let's open it up. What do you think? My main concept here is, has this person misdefined what the core role is of the monk, and therefore it's colored their perception, or there's a lot more to say about the value of the monk? They really put them low on the totem pole, but in my experience, I've really enjoyed the monk. So what other elements can we bring out from here?
All right. First of all, take away Stunning Strike. What's the value of the monk? If you have a DM that's willing to look at how the game is actually played versus the game's designed system, you're probably always going to have more fun. So what I would start this with, and I don't know who wrote this blog post, and I don't know what their experiences are because I'm not them. Whenever I've had a monk player, I've made sure to give them stuff so that they felt more effective. So I've been very liberal, for lack of a better term, in giving them bracers of defense, cloak of protection, ring of protection, making sure they have equipment that is going to cover their mechanical deficiencies. Out of the core classes, I recently did a live stream ranking all 13 official classes, just by kind of a full encapsulation of just broadly looking at their overall effectiveness and the variety of subclasses they bring to the table, what general ranking they have, what tier. And to me, Monk is a B tier class, right? Along with Barbarian. And the reason for that is Bear Totem Barbarian is like one of the most powerful class builds in the game. No argument. But if you look at all of Barbarians, right? Barbarian literally runs the gamut from S tier amazing subclasses all the way to Battle Rager, which is like, I can never find a reason why I'd suggest that class to someone. F tier, it fails. So overall, if you take everything to account, if I'm being nice to Barbarian, B tier. Not the best, not the worst. And Monk kind of falls in the same category.
So when I think about the value of Monk and whether or not it's a good class or something, I can agree that it is a B tier class. It's not the best, not the worst, but it can definitely be rewarding when you commit to it. A lot of people multi-class with Monk, sometimes with Rogue or something like that, just to get extra damage if that's what they're prioritizing as their character. But I've just taken out the player's handbook here, and I was looking at just what the class provides and what the subclasses provide in a party sense, to get a sense of what the intended role of Monk is. So is it a tank? Is it support? Is it control? And we talk about how Monk is self-sufficient. So what that really means is that Monk has little to gain from being in the party, but that can also mean that it has a lot to give. So if we take away Stunning Strike, which is just the base thing, and we look at the subclasses and stuff, because everything else is just benefiting the Monk, right? If we look at the subclasses, Way of the Open Hand is another way to benefit the party, causing enemies to not take reactions, causing them to get pushed or displacing them. So those are control elements, right? If we go to Way of Shadow, you get a bunch of spells for your key points, like Darkness, Dark Vision, Pass Without Trace, Silence. These are spells that can be considered control or buff. And so going on towards Way of the Four Elements, which we all have our own problems with, you get a variety of elemental spells, like Cone of Cold. There's also Hold Person at 6th level. You can do Stone Skin, but only on yourself. So that's another self-sufficient thing. So if I'm just considering all of these different abilities that you could go into with Monk just based on the PHB, I would even say that Monk is one of those classes that doesn't gain much from being in the party, but is really useful for the party as a whole. Definitely has a role in it, which I would even say is probably control. Displacing folks, preventing reactions, stunning them, other things like that. And so it's like Adam was saying, this guy on the blog was saying, you get hit a lot, you don't do a lot of damage. Well, maybe that's not what you should be prioritizing. You can make a damage dealing Monk if your party is like more interested in control or support or something like that. And you can definitely be the front line if you need to. But your abilities are more geared towards setting up everyone else, in my opinion. So that's what I think when I see the value of the Monk, is a kind of, not the best, not the worst, but it can really fit that niche where you need a melee character and you need them to be able to set up your other characters so they can be their best selves.
Yeah, and we have to really define what the control role means. Control ultimately is amplifying the effectiveness of your party by either somehow debilitating or opening up whatever their goal is, and taking away options that the other person has, right? So the reason I asked, what is a Monk without Stunning Strike, is because in terms of the features that you get from Monk, you're avoiding the equipment dependency, like you talked about, Adam, with like Fighter has, because you have a feature that addresses, even though your martial arts might not be the most damaging ability, it can still count as magical and you can punch ghosts, right? Now, but also, like I said, Monk is, if you look at what ability scores it needs to perform well, it suffers from multiple ability score dependency, right? Because really you need a competitive dexterity, constitution, and wisdom in order to be effective. And if you're running a standard array, which I know a lot of the monks that you've experienced, Adam, have not run, then that can that's going to change its effectiveness, right? Because it can't contribute if it's at 0 and incapacitated. And usually because the monk abilities, including the save throw DC against stunning strike and these other control elements, are wisdom based, a monk has to prioritize dexterity and wisdom over constitution. And that constitution hit can make it so that you're a 10th level monk, you only have like 60 or 70 hit points. And if you think about 10th level threats, it only takes one missed save to knock you to 0, right? So that's really the thing I'm pointing out, is the structure of your game is going to affect the enjoyability of each class. And that this person may have very legitimate experiences where monk is about as effective as ranger. That's how bad it is. Because if I think back to Thursdays, there would be games where, Ken would run in, get knocked to 0 as a monk, can't contribute. You can't have fun rolling the dice if you don't get a turn to roll the dice, And I think that's a very, it's an important part of the game's design to consider.
Thank you so much for listening to some of our podcast highlights. This podcast is part of the Darkmoor Podcast Network. If you want to support the content creators, feel free to visit our Patreon, and please, game responsibly.